It's Friday. It's in the gun. You know what that means. We've got Phil Steele here on the show to dive into some of the best matchups around the Big 12, college football, and of course, the Mountaineers. We'll get his thoughts on all that coming up here on ITG.
You are now watching Believe.
ITG.
With special guest, Phil Steele.
Author of the College Football Bible.
You can see things before they happen.
Well, I definitely like West Virginia's offensive line.
All you got to do is bet on the winner and you'll never lose.
I like the Mountaineers to win this one.
Taylor, touchdown!
To me, the key matchup here is that West Virginia run game. Hey, a real pleasure being on. Thanks for having me on the In the Gun podcast.
Because once you enter this family, there's no getting out.
In the Gun, episode 202. I'm Skylar Callan. That is the signal caller, Jed Drenning, rejoining me this week for Phil Steele. We'll get his thoughts on some of the best games around the nation here in just a few moments. But of course, before we dive into anything, a shout out, a major thank you to our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs. BetOnline, where the game starts, and also to Toothman Ford, where we all know cars cost less in Grafton. Got to go check out what those guys have down there at Toothman Ford. They do a lot of great stuff supporting the Mountaineers and this podcast. Great friends of the show for quite some time now. So shout out to JR and the guys down there. So Jed, welcome back. Obviously you didn't have the picks last week with Wes and I'm not sure how we ended up doing. So I'll turn this over to you to let us know. I don't know if you even know, but you have the results as to what happened over the weekend.
Yeah, I'm trying to. You want to fill for a minute as I scroll back through?
Yeah,
Because I had the same issue on the show earlier this week in our timeline and our group chat trying to chart through the nonsense.
You should see our group chat with Wes, Jed, Owen, and I. It is nonstop, at least 7 or 8 different tweets shared in there throughout the day. I mean, it's some interesting stuff, but it's a fun group chat. Now, the game on Saturday, I really had no idea how to wager some of these. I don't even remember some of the props. I know one was like a Rocco Becht passing yards per attempt. There was a rushing one in there somewhere too. And it was just kind of a game that I thought was going to be a rock fight, but I didn't know how it was going to pan out. So
I got it.
I'm wondering how I did.
You'll probably remember your answers because that's the only part I don't have. But let's go with question number one. Rocco Becht was averaging coming in 8.9 yards per attempt. Now, that's a stat that factors in your completions and your incompletions and picks and everything, every throw against your yards, passing yards. Impressively, he had averaged 11 plus yards per attempt, 11 plus yards per attempt in 6 of his last 8 games. The defense was giving up 8.8 yards per attempt, which was near last in the Big 12. So the question was, would Rocco Becht average over under 9.0 yards per attempt? I don't know what you answered.
For some reason, I don't even remember why I don't remember this one. Or at least my answer. I think I went under. But I'm not sure.
Rocco went over at 10.2. He didn't get his 11.
I went over.
There you go. Good amendment. But he ended up at 10.2. Question number 2. This was talking about West Virginia being the only team in the Big 12 to average more than 215 passing and rushing heading into the game. And the Iowa State defense had a streak of 33 straight games, not allowing a team to do both those things. So we kind of tapered the number. 215 seemed too chunky. So we said, will the WVU offense Saturday night pass and rush for 180 or more? Again, I don't have the answers you guys gave, but I have what happened. The answer was no, they did not. WVU passed for 206 and rushed for 148. So they didn't hit either number.
Yeah, I thought that they would stay under one of them. I couldn't remember which one I said, but I didn't think they'd get there.
Yeah, they didn't hit either one. Closest with the but they went over with the 180 with the passing, but they didn't hit the 215, I should say. For the second straight year, Iowa State, and this was heading into the game, was number one in the Big 12 in turnover margin at +7. WVU is -3. This was heading into the game, but was +2 in their previous 2 games. When the Mountaineers under Neil Brown win the turnover margin at home, they're undefeated, 9-0. Question: will WVU buck the trend and win the turnover margin? We know the answer to that.
Yeah.
They did not. They finished -2.
Yeah.
So that's how things shook out the first time around.
Yeah. And
of course,
in that group chat that we have, that's one of the things that we shared. I don't even remember. It may have been me that actually shared it. The second interception that Garrett threw, there was a film breakdown, and it was a pretty nice breakdown that's showing why Garrett saw what he saw and was kind of tricked into that throw. Iowa State's got a good defense, man. Like they present a lot of tough issues. Kansas State's going to have some similar challenges, but that's just one of the best defensive coordinators in college football. I mean, that's plain and simple.
yeah, it was funny seeing that name. It was Jeff Woody who did the film break.
Yeah.
And Jeff Woody was their starting feature back in our early days in the Big 12 in 2012 and 2013. And he's the one who did the film breakdown. And basically what he showed was they overloaded one side to get Garrett to flush. Now, the plan could have backfired. It was a particular 3rd and 7 in which Garrett kind of threw against his body, trying to hit T-Ray on a crosser.
Could have took off.
Garrett probably should have tucked it and at least taken his chances with that back or an open space. It wouldn't have been easy, but it was a better chance to move the sticks than the throw was. And that's one of the things in watching tape that I'm sure Garrett would agree with. But that's how that shook out. But yeah, they had some wrinkles. We talked about some of the other wrinkles in the recap, but John Heacock's a creative play caller, and Owen and Wes and I discussed, even though K-State is also an odd stack defense with Joe Klanderman, there are some nuanced differences, and there's even a philosophical difference in how they approach the game. And we talk about some of that, and it's kind of fascinating. K-State tends to be more aggressive with their version of it than the safety net that Iowa State presents and takes away the big play opportunity. So interesting, similar challenge in some ways, but different in others.
Yeah, and as I told you yesterday, I had one interesting note on John Heacock. I didn't know that he was the former defensive coordinator at West Liberty up there near my hometown. So
the other reason I knew that, Skyler, is I've had that discussion with Jeff Steele, because if I remember right, when Heacock was at West Lib, I think it predated our time at Glenville. So Rich and I didn't face him, but Castile did, because Jeff was already at Shepherd.
Yeah. Yeah. West Liberty is like the school that everyone goes to if they don't go to WVU in Wheeling. That's pretty much what it's been. And now Wheeling University's kind of got its own thing, but West Lib is
both. West Lib and WVU. Yeah, he's not WVU, was at West Lib. So yeah.
So, all right, well, we won't we won't hold you any longer. We're going to go ahead and get to Phil Steele here in just a few seconds. But first, another thank you to Fortis for roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed. Be sure to visit fortis.us.com. Hang tight. On the other side, we'll have Phil Steele breaking down some games.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cars cost less in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
Back in the gun with Phil Steele. It's time to break into or get down into some of the top matchups around the country. And before we do, Phil, thank you for coming on to the show once again this week. Go ahead and feel free to plug anything you got going on the website.
Hey, I appreciate that. Once again, I've got the up and available right now. I've got the Phil Steele Plus Tour with selections. It's all free. I take you for a tour how to use the Phil Steele Plus site, which has got all the information I use to handicap games. And just loaded with information. Takes you through a tour of the site and gives you free plays. You get 5 free selections, 5 quick hitters, so 10 free plays for this weekend. Just go to philsteele.com, look right at the front of the menu, and click on the Phil Steele Plus Tour with selections.
Well, Phil, we've got our first full slate of Big 12 action, all 16 teams playing. So we have 8 games we're going to get to. But first, we're going to start with some of these critical top 25 matchups, including Alabama's trip to Tennessee. The adventurous life of Kalen DeBoer trying to fill the legendary shoes of Coach Saban continues. Alabama survives a near miss against South Carolina, heading to face a Tennessee team that survived the matchup against Florida. They're an Arkansas loss away from being unbeaten. Alabama on the road is a slight favorite. What do you see playing out in Knoxville?
Yeah, and this is one where I've been arguing with my computer all week because my computer likes Tennessee, but I like Alabama. I think we're going to see the Alabama team that played Georgia a couple weeks ago. There was a little bit of a letdown, I think, from that Georgia game. Meanwhile, with Tennessee, you know, Nico Maliava is a guy that started out the season red hot against some pretty weak teams, but now against good competition, not so great. And I think when you look at the 2 quarterbacks, I'll take Jalen Milroe over Nico. I think it gives them an advantage there. I do think Tennessee has a slight edge on defense. They're at home, but I just like this Alabama team. I think that they've got more weapons on offense, and I'm going to go with Alabama to go on the road and get the win there.
Going to the Big Ten, it's a top 25 matchup, Michigan at Illinois. You told us a couple of weeks ago, Phil, about Luke Altmaier and the season that he's having. It's weird to say that Illinois got a quarterback edge over Michigan potentially here. Michigan's had a disastrous start to the season at that spot. The Illini have got a couple of overtime wins, especially with their last one coming against Purdue in a shootout. How do you see this one going, and can Illinois pick up another big win?
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting watching the Big Ten Network over the summer, and you know, you talk to Bielema. The big game that they talked about all summer long was this Michigan game. It's the 100th anniversary dedication of the stadium. They finagled it so they can get Michigan coming into town. This is a massive, massive game for Illinois, and one they've been pointing to. And you go back to last week's game against Purdue. They led that thing 27-3 at the start of the third quarter. They're a heavy favorite in the game. I honestly think they started looking ahead to Michigan and maybe let down a little bit, thinking we got this one in the bag. And it came back to bite them. They needed overtime to beat Purdue. I think we'll see an intense Illinois team the entire game. And as you mentioned, Skylar, they've got the quarterback advantage. I'll take Luke Altmaier, who's got a 14-1 ratio. Now, Jack Tuttle did come off the bench. I think he would have been the starting quarterback because he'd not been banged up in August, and he's had a full week to work with the team. Michigan does have the better defense, but I'm throwing out a little bit of what happened in the second half against Purdue is just a bad situation. I like the Illini to get this one at home, and they're actually an underdog in this one. They're a three-point dog in this, so I like Illinois plus the points to pull the upset there.
Let's head to the Lone Star State. One of the most anticipated games on the schedule when the SEC schedule came out, with the addition of Texas and Oklahoma to the Southeastern Conference. You have number 5 Georgia on the road at Darrell K. Royal Stadium under the lights against unbeaten and number 1 ranked Texas. Now, what's curious about that, we're kind of, have some experience in different scenarios and different game situations in Austin. And the tea sippers can be somewhat sedate even when they're pushing 100,000 people, but we've been part of a sold-out crowd under the lights at Texas. And when there's a novelty to the game, like West Virginia's first game in the Big 12, that was a massive crowd, and that crowd made a difference. And I have to think the energy of this crowd at DKR is going to be just a gargantuan part of this football game. What do you see playing out with the Bulldogs heading into Austin?
Yeah, and this is another one where I've been arguing with my computer all week long because my computer actually has Texas winning this by 32-17, but I
Wow.
like Georgia, and for the reason of Kirby Smart, rare role as an underdog. You know that they've got plenty of talent on the team. I like what I saw in the second half. Remember, they trailed Alabama 30-7. Now, most teams would just give up at that point, but Georgia actually battled back and took the lead in that game, 34-30. And as good as Texas's defense has been this year, they're allowing just 230 yards per game. They really haven't taken on a good offense the entire year. In fact, the best offense they faced has been UTSA. I mean, Michigan's offense is challenged. Oklahoma's offense is challenged. And Georgia, once again, the great second half against Alabama. I like the weapons they have on offense with Carson Beck and Trevor Etienne. And I'm just going to go with the pedigree of Georgia, Kirby Smart as an underdog to pull the upset here on the road.
I'm right there with you, Phil. I've been on UGA all week. Let's hop into the Big 12. It's a game on Friday night. Oklahoma State losing three straight going into their bye week. Now they go to Provo to take on the BYU Cougars, who just find a way to keep winning games and get more and look more impressive as they do it. A crazy start to this season for BYU. One that no one saw coming, and same thing with Oklahoma State. No one saw this coming this early in the year, where they're 3-3. Is this a time for Oklahoma State to get off the schneid, or does BYU keep it rolling?
It should be the time for that to happen, but I just haven't seen enough from Oklahoma State this year to say they can. You go back to that Arkansas game, it probably should have been 28-0 at the half, Arkansas. And if that was the case, Arkansas would have rolled them. But that interception return for a touchdown was huge. The Utah game, they trailed 22-3 with 5 minutes to go. The Kansas State game, I didn't even bother really paying attention to the fourth quarter. Kansas State had put them away. And then West Virginia. The thing I loved about that was 389 yards rushing, and their longest touchdown run was 15 yards. It was just between the tackles. They beat them down. And the thing with BYU, and I say this a lot, is the confidence level. Every single win they get a little bit more confident. And now it's 6-0. They actually outgained a Big 12 team last week by 9 yards. They outgained Arizona. They're not doing it flashy wise, but they're doing it in a fashion where they did put Arizona away, and it was a very comfortable win in the second half there. And you've got the altitude. They've been at home now for a third straight week, and it's a Friday night, and I think the fans are going to be fired up. I like BYU minus the 9.5 in this one.
Talk about a team that's not doing it flashy, but's getting it done, Phil. Arizona State, second-year coach, Kenny Dillingham, he came back home. He's tried to resurrect this program, and boy, has he taken some strides this year. They're fun to watch. They're easy to pull for. Scatabo might be the most entertaining player in the Big 12 right now in a strange way. They're on the road at 5-1, heading to another overachieving football team in Cincinnati. Sorsby has made a big difference for that Cincinnati offense. And now you have Satterfield and his Bearcats sitting there at 4-2 playing host to this 5-1 Arizona State team. Phil, you've probably seen the record for these teams that in all these conference changes have had to travel across two time zones, and it's not good. Do you see that playing a role in this football game and hurting Arizona State as they visit Cincinnati?
I see it playing a role. And also I think Cincinnati is better than most people think. You go back to that Pittsburgh game, they led that thing by a couple of scores, led it by a lot, and then they sort of let up in the second half. When I watched the Texas Tech game, and that was on the road in a very tough environment, I thought Cincinnati was the better team. They had a 29-21 first down edge, 555, 42-yard edge. And when I watch a game, I count good plays, bad plays. They had about 62% good plays in that game. I thought they outplayed Texas Tech. This is a team that could easily be 6-0 right now. I like the fact that Corey Kiner returned to the lineup last week after being injured. You touched on Sorsby with the 13-3 ratio. And the defense seems to get better each and every week. Arizona State's great story, but they could have lost to Kansas. Needed a late score to get that one. The Utah game, Cam Rising was just rusty as all get out. See how many passes he threw into the ground and low in that game. I think we've got a really good Cincinnati team. Plus, Sam Leavitt's out for Arizona State. They're going to be going with Jeff Sims here. Jeff Sims is was a turnover machine at Nebraska. And the same thing at Georgia Tech. He tends to turn the ball over. Scadaboo's a great story, great running back, but I think since he keys on him, forces the game on Jeff Sims. And I just think Cincinnati is the better team at home. I like the Bearcats here.
A massive one at Arrowhead. All kidding aside, here it's Houston and Kansas. Houston surprisingly defeated TCU a couple of weeks back before their bye week. Kansas, Phil, they may be the best 1-5 team I've seen. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. They got 4 one-score losses. A few of those you could argue they should have probably won. Is this a time for them to get things turned around against Houston, who's changing some things up offensively lately?
Yeah, it should be. Although the one thing I want to point out about Houston is they do have a really good defense. Their defense is actually holding foes to 126 yards per game, which below their season average, which is number 6 in the country. That's really good. But the offense, as you mentioned, they switched to Zeon Chris and got a little more offense against TCU. But they also have 3 games where they could have been shut out in. They were shut out by Iowa State and Cincinnati. And the UNLV game, they got a touchdown with like a minute to go to avoid the shutout. I think Kansas, a desperate team at home, and you hit it right on the head, Skylar. They are so much better than 1-5. They could easily just change one play in each of those games, and it's a different record. So I'm going to go with Kansas minus the points at home to get a feel-good game here.
You got a really interesting matchup with Colorado at Arizona. It felt like Colorado, in a losing effort, showed us a lot more than they have in any other game that they won. You had Travis Hunter on the shelf with an injury. You had Jimmy Horn down, and Sanders still played good enough football to maybe win that game, but for that last touchdown by Kansas State. Meanwhile, they're on the road facing what looks like a reeling Arizona Wildcats team. The most concerning thing for Arizona probably over the course of the last couple of weeks, Noah Fafita, who entered the season as probably a quarterback with maybe the most potential in the Big 12. The last couple of weeks, 1 touchdown, 5 picks. They haven't looked good in about 3 weeks now. How do you see this shaking out with Colorado visiting Tucson?
Yeah, and I think you hit it right on the head in the fact that 3 weeks ago, I would have had Arizona favored by 10 to 14 points in this game because they were looking pretty good at the start of the year, especially after that win against Utah. But they've been pretty shaky the last couple of weeks. And as you touched on with Fafita, 8-9 ratio on the year with that 1-5 over the last couple of weeks. When I look at Colorado, I thought Kansas State had them beat. It was 21-7, but to rally back and actually take the lead in that game, that did show me a lot. But I'm still going to go with Arizona. They're at home here. If I liked them by 10 to 14 points a couple weeks ago, as much as Colorado's been impressive the last 2 weeks and Arizona has not, I still think Arizona's a better team at home. So I'm going to go with the Wildcats here.
Going back to the Lone Star State, Baylor, a team that seems like their season's kind of hanging in the balance here. They're 2-4, have lost 3 straight. They've got to get a win. It's going to be tough to do it in Lubbock, a tough place to play. Texas Tech has been just absolutely hitting on all cylinders offensively. Taj Brooks, Baron Morton, that whole offense is really rolling right now. Does Baylor have a chance to go into Lubbock and pull out a W?
I think they do have that opportunity, and frankly, for Coach Aranda, he really needs to get a win here. When you look at Texas Tech, they did only have 14 first downs and 331 yards against Arizona, only 334 yards against Arizona State. Like I said, I thought Cincinnati outplayed them. So I'm not blown away, although their only loss this year came when Taj Brooks didn't play against Washington State. And Baylor, probably better than their record would indicate. They've played some teams tough. They just have had a tough time with the turnovers in some of the games. I think Texas Tech's a better team at home, should win it. But I do think Baylor's going to give them a game and has the potential to pull the upset. So that one, I'm going to watch and learn a little bit more about those two teams.
Jed, you're on mute.
I'm on mute, Phil. That's the way people like me. Let's go to Jack Trice Stadium in Ames, Iowa. You have a UCF team that I'll tell you what, that comeback win against TCU seems like a century ago. But they're visiting the Cyclones, what looks like the best team in the Big 12. You have situations at quarterback for UCF. You have the Cyclones playing probably the most consistent brand of football of anybody in this conference. They're laying 14 the last I saw. Seems like a pretty chunky number. What do you see playing out under the lights in Ames, Iowa?
Yeah, it's pretty much 13.5 across the board from what I'm looking at, but basically 14. I just think this is Matt Campbell's best team that he has put on the field. In fact, when I went over the team with him post spring this year, it seemed like every position recap. We go through the individual players, he talks about each one, and then I say, okay, how do you feel about the unit? He would say, hey, Phil, this is probably the best, or this is probably the most experienced, or this is the most talented this unit has been since I've been here. And yet, I remember a couple of years ago, they came into the preseason, I believe, number 9 in the country, and then didn't live up to expectations. This year, they came in under the radar, and now they're 6-0. And the thing about Campbell in the past was he didn't cover as a favorite, but he's been doing that. They've got 4 straight big wins as favorites. So I think they're able to handle that. They are the much better team. UCF is a team that came in with high expectations, especially with KJ Jefferson. Jefferson didn't live up to the billing. They switched to Ja'Cory Brown. They've had some key players leave the team and redshirt after the 4 games, and they come into this one struggling. I just think Iowa State's a team where they're the best team in the Big 12 right now, and I like Iowa State minus the points.
TCU and Utah, a couple of teams that probably feel like they're having a little bit of a disappointing season. You didn't probably expect TCU to lose to Houston. TCU also should have beat UCF earlier in the year. Utah's lost a couple in a row. Cam Rising's officially out for the season, so that's not a week-to-week thing anymore. But Isaac Wilson has been a bit of a turnover machine himself. So can Utah rally behind him and still remain in the mix for the Big 12 with a win this weekend?
Yeah, I think we're going to see Utah turn their season around right now because at least they don't have to worry. Is Cam playing? Is he not playing? They could put all their eggs in the basket of Isaac Wilson. And I think they are. When I looked at Utah at the start of the year, I thought they were the most talented team in the Big 12. Now, taking Rising out of the equation, taking a healthy Rising out of the equation is something. But, last week Rising came in and threw a bunch of bad passes, and it probably was the key to losing at Arizona State. I think having just the one QB, being at home, they've got Muss behind them. And you go back to that Arizona game, first 3 drives right down the field, but they got stopped on downs twice and settled for a field goal once. They just got to start putting it in the end zone. I think they're the more complete team. They're at home. I like Utah to win this one by over a touchdown.
And Phil, let's head to Morgantown. You've got Kansas State visiting, playing really good football, coming off a big last-minute win in Boulder. Big moment for quarterback Avery Johnson, for that matter, with that game-winning drive in the final minutes. What I look to here is that Kansas State running game, one of the best, not just in the Big 12, but one of the best in the country. Now, West Virginia defensively has fared pretty well against the run this year. We're 6th in the Big 12 against the run. But when you look at the 2 best rushing offenses we faced, Kansas, we gave up 247 on the ground. Penn State, we gave up 222 on the ground. It seems to me that this Kansas State ground game is more formidable than either of those two with this 3-headed monster they have. What do you see playing out? Can West Virginia stand tall against this Kansas State running game and force Avery Johnson to throw the football and try and beat him?
Well, I'll tell you, Jed, so far this year, West Virginia's played 6 games. Now, the teams they've lost to, Penn State, unbeaten. Pittsburgh, unbeaten. Iowa State, unbeaten. So that they've got some pretty tough losses. And in those games, I was sort of wishy-washy as, saying they were going to be good, close games. The other games I've had West Virginia. I liked West Virginia over Oklahoma State, over Kansas, over Albany. And guess what? I like West Virginia this week. I think it's a good situation. They are at home. I thought they played a really good game against Iowa State, especially in the first half. It's a game where a couple of turnovers probably turned that game around, the missed field goal, things like that. Kansas State's coming off a big road game at Colorado late at night, and now they've got to travel again across the country to West Virginia. I wasn't blown away by Kansas State in the Tulane game. I wasn't blown away by Kansas State in the BYU game. And this is one where I think the 2 teams are fairly close. The situation really favors West Virginia. I'll take West Virginia at home this week. I like the Mountaineers. much like I did when I had liked them against Oklahoma State, Kansas, and Albany. So I'm taking West Virginia this week, and I think they should have an impressive performance.
I love it. I was not expecting that at all. I thought this may be a popcorn game, or maybe we'd have our hearts broken a little bit, but I love it. So, Phil, the one question I've got for you, obviously, as you mentioned, West Virginia's their three losses against undefeated teams. Their three wins have come against an FCS team and a pair of teams that are a combined 0-6 in Big 12 play. It kind of feels like we still really don't know whether or not this team's a legitimate Big 12 contender or if they're just going to be kind of playing to the level of their competition. How do you see this team finishing out the rest of the season in terms of whether or not they're going to be in the mix? You've said it before. You thought they would get through this stretch in pretty good shape. Do you still see that being the case and being in the mix there in late November?
Yeah, if they play like I think they will this weekend and beat Kansas State, they're clearly in the mix to get to the Big 12 title game. Now, that at Cincinnati game is going to be extremely difficult. The at Texas Tech game difficult, but I believe Arizona's a winnable game on the road. Baylor at home, UCF at home. I think they can win at Texas Tech. I watched Cincinnati go in there. I think the Cincinnati game is probably the toughest one after this. And if they end up the season, even if they lose that Cincinnati game with 2 losses, they have a chance of getting there. But I think as long as they beat Kansas State this week, like I think they will, they're a legitimate Big 12 contender.
See, Mountaineer fans, the world is not coming to an end yet. It's 3-3, but you're 2-1 in conference play. Phil likes West Virginia this weekend, so you got to feel a little bit better heading into this game against Kansas State. So, Phil,
We should point out.
Yeah, go ahead.
We told Phil before we started taping, hey, give it to us straight.
Yeah.
Give it to us straight. Don't candy coat it, right? So he did.
Yep, that's what we like the most about Phil. He keeps it straight on here with us. So, Phil, we appreciate you once again for joining us here on another week of ITG, and we wish you the best for the college football weekend.
Sounds great. A lot of fun talking football with you guys. And, hey, let's go Mountaineers this weekend.
Yeah, let's get a W for once against a ranked team. Let's see if it happens. So, Phil Steele, everyone, make sure you hang tight. On the other side, we'll make our picks for this week's game, and we'll see you then.
There are better-known tractors in the world than Coyote. Ones with bigger names, longer histories, more popular hats, cute toy lines. But there's not a single tractor ever been built that's better equipped to do the dirty work. So we'll just focus on what really matters. Coyote, we dig dirt.
Now at Johnston Equipment, get 0% financing for 72 months, plus a free loader on select Coyote models in stock. Visit us on Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan.
Quite the outro there for Phil Steele picking the Mountaineers to get the upset this weekend. At the very least, maybe just cover the spread, but hopefully they do get the outright win. Great stuff as always from Phil Steele, breaking down all the big matchups in college football. Before we get to our weekend's picks, another thank you to Johnston's Equipment. Get 0% financing for up to 72 months with approved credit on select Coyote tractors. In stock now at Johnston Equipment, Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan. So let's head over to that ITG sports book. What do we have in store this week, Jed?
First one I struggled with because I'm not sure what's too easy. The last time Kansas State was in Morgantown, the last time these two teams played was 2 years ago in 2022. Kansas State won 48-31. But we mentioned in the preview, one of the most curious things about that game was the first quarter. It was just this bizarre first quarter.
Yep.
Each team had a pick six. There were a lot of big plays. The score was Kansas State 28, West Virginia 19 after the first quarter. And if I'm not mistaken, that might have been the highest scoring first quarter in West Virginia football history, if I remember right. 47 points. So I wanted to ask a question that kind of pivoted around that 47-point first quarter. So here's what I'm leaning toward. The over-under for this game, according to Vegas, is 55.5. 47 is close enough.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say this. Question number one, will there be more than 47 points combined scored by both teams? Should I go in the first half or in the game?
Oh, gosh. First half would make it easier for me.
Let's go game. It's
Okay.
55 over under, so it's closer. Let's go. Okay, will there be more than 47 combined points scored in the game?
I I'm right on the edge. I because I picked the under for the game in my article earlier this week, but
Yeah.
I'm not going very far over this number. So it's going to be like sandwiched right there in the middle. I want to say it's like around 50, 49, 50, somewhere like that. Not very confident in it, but I feel like it's going to be another semi-rock fight. In there will be limited possessions. Now I don't know if there will only be 17 possessions like there was last week, but it feels like one of those games where both teams going to run the ball like crazy. Watch the clock just milk. It's going to be another fast night. I don't know. I think it's going to be under, or well, over that number, under the actual number.
Okay. I was going to make it interesting and say no, but I think about this. I'm like, okay, we're coming out of 28-16 game, which was 44 points, and the over in that was like 53. So that was way under what Vegas projected. Here's what I'm looking at. Uh, Kansas State's offense is one of the best ground games in the country. West Virginia can run the football. Kansas State is very stout against the run. West Virginia is
Been
better than
better.
they have been against the run. We're going to be trying to make Kansas State throw. West Virginia is going to want to throw the ball some to take advantage of some of the struggles that Kansas State has had against the pass. I think that extends the game long enough. There'll be enough of that mixed in. I'm going to say yes. And we will go over the 47 combined points for the game. So that's question number one. We both go yes. All right, let's look at this. Kansas State's DJ Giddens, who's fourth in the country in rushing. He's eclipsed 100 yards rushing in 8 of his last 10 games dating back to last year. Now, West Virginia has been kind of a mixed bag against some
Mm-hmm.
of these talented backs that we've faced throughout the course of the season. Nick Singleton for Penn State, he's an NFL guy. He ran for 114 against West Virginia in the opener. Go back to what Devin Neal did. Devin Neal for Kansas ran for 110. Even last week, Carson Hansen almost 100, finished with 96. But then you had Desmond Reed, who was setting all these record numbers early in the season for Pitt, and we kind of bottled him up on the ground. Ollie Gordon, we kind of bottled him up on the ground. Uh, my question, quite simply, is what's going to play out? We talked about DJ Giddens, 100 yards rushing, 8 of his last 10 games. Question number two, quite simply, will Giddens go over 100 versus West Virginia?
That's a tough one. Um, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go under. I think the last 2 weeks has shown that the Mountaineers have stepped up against the run. They only allowed 50 yards against Ollie Gordon. I believe last week against Iowa State was what 2.9 yards per carry. So I think it's going to be under. He'll get his yardage. It may be 80, it may be 99 for all I know. But Avery Johnson is going to factor into that as well. Dylan Edwards. They have multiple guys that can run it. So I think that plus, like you said, with West Virginia wanting to take advantage of Kansas State's secondary, I think the same thing with Kansas State. They understand that they probably have better success throwing it too. So even with that elite run game, even though DJ Giddens is one of the best in the country, I think he stays under for a multitude of reasons.
Okay, I'll say yes, he'll go over. My thinking is this. You heard Phil talk about what an emotional challenge this will be for Kansas State. They want an emotionally charged game late on the road at Colorado. Now you got to turn around, get on a plane, come to Morgantown across the country. It's a tough challenge for them. And in tough challenges, you tend to dance with who brung you.
Yep.
And Chris Kleiman has said this offense is very much built around DJ Giddens. I think in this road environment, in an emotionally challenging game for Iowa State to stabilize after that big win last week, I think they're going to lean maybe even a little more than normal on DJ Giddens to try and help out the cause, make life as easy as possible for Avery Johnson, and he'll get enough totes to push him over 100. Maybe not by much, but I think that I'm going to lean that way. I think that's going to happen. And then let's go to question number three, similar to something we've had as a prop bet before. This matchup features the top two rushing quarterbacks in the Big 12. Garrett Green with 398 yards, more than any other quarterback in the Big 12. Avery Johnson is number two behind Garrett with 306.
Mm-hmm.
Now they enter heading in different directions. Garrett, 2 weeks ago at 86, and this past week against Iowa State had a season high 87. Meanwhile, Avery Johnson, because of the sacks that Kansas State allowed against Colorado on the road last week, Avery Johnson actually had negative yards rushing, minus 15. So the question is quite simply, Avery Johnson being as dangerous as he is, Garrett Green, we all know what he brings to bear as a threat on the ground. Which quarterback will rush for the most yards?
Well,
Garrett or Avery Johnson?
if you know me, you know I cannot stand when they dock quarterback sacks for rushing yards. I can't stand that. I don't know how else you would categorize it, but I don't think it should be like that. And I'll
You know what the
die on that
NFL
hill.
does?
Yeah.
You know what the NFL does? Team passing yards. Your sacks get counted against your team passing yards. They don't count against your rush yards.
Yeah. So I'll die on that hill, by the way. I just think it's weird, but I'll go GG. I think he understands that he's got to be a game changer, and sometimes with those interceptions, I think like we mentioned earlier in the show, that second one that he had, he probably should have just called his own number and try to get the first down. I think he's going to learn from that on tape this week, and Kansas State's going to, I think, kind of almost beg him to kind of run the football. I really do. I think they're going to find ways to get Garrett the ball in his own hands. I think he's going to run it well. And as we saw at the end of the Kansas game, when he just kind of took over, that's what led West Virginia to a win. So it might be a similar situation where it's going to come down to the wire, and Garrett's going to have to make some plays. It can't just be all on his arm. It's going to have to be with his feet as well. So I'll go with Garrett. And part of that too, even though TJ Jackson is a question mark for the game, I still think West Virginia's D front is going to be able to get pressure on Avery, and that's been one of the calling cards for this defense all year. That defensive front has been very impressive. So I'm going to go with Garrett Green.
Yeah, you mentioned TJ Jackson. He could play such a prominent role, and we didn't discuss that in the preview, but that's a decision that we probably won't know till we approach the game. But in terms of this prop bet, okay, well, let's break it down first. I look at Garrett and the possibilities of what he might do. Well, 2 years ago against Joe Klanderman's K-State defense, and again, that wasn't long after they had installed this odd stack version of what they do. Garrett was coming off a 100-plus yard rushing performance where he got so hot against Oklahoma and that win in Morgantown.
Yeah.
Well, Kansas State corralled him the next week, 12 carries, 17 yards rushing. But I'll be honest with you, Skylar, the Kansas State defense I see on tape is stylistically a little different than what they were doing even 2 years ago. They seem to be a little more aggressive, which gives me some pause, because if you're going to roll the dice and you're going to take chances with some 5 and 6 man pressures more so than they did 2 years ago, that does give Garrett the opportunity to break, contain, and head downhill against those defensive backs in man coverage. But at the same time, I do think Klanderman and that defensive staff are watching what Garrett has done in the last couple weeks. They do want to corral him. They do want to keep things in front of him. They're smart enough to, if they come in under control. Whereas Avery Johnson, he's kind of due. He
Yeah.
hasn't run the football in recent weeks as much. I do think they're going to want DJ Giddens going. And I think that they're going to want Avery Johnson running the football more than be pressed into passing. And I think they're going to set up some opportunities against this West Virginia defense to let him throw it. But I do think they want to make his life as easy as possible in this tough environment, coming off that big win. I'm going to go with Avery Johnson to outrush Garrett Green for that reason. I think Kansas State's going to be kind of hell-bent on keeping Garrett in front of them and not let him run for 80-plus yards as he has in the last couple of weeks.
It'll be interesting. I do think that's going to be a key in the game for sure. Everyone's got their eyes on the running backs, rightfully so. I think Jaheim's got to have a bounce back game. CJ Donaldson, those two combined really didn't get anything going last week against Iowa State. They need those guys to be back to where they were in Stillwater against Oklahoma State. If you get that, I mean, good luck, too, because this is a really stingy Kansas State run defense, but who knows?
Country.
Yeah. So that'll do it for us here this week on ITG. Make sure you hit that subscribe button here on In the Gun Podcast. Give us a follow on X at the same handle. And also, too, check out our pinned tweet that has the pick'ems that you can take a part in. And also, too, as Jed and company discussed on the preview show, go and scroll and find that link to Garnett Hollis helping the young man out, trying to beat cancer. Just a really cool thing that he's doing. I think there's actually a couple other Mountaineers, I can't remember off the top of my head, that have kind of a similar setup right now. Maybe Jaheim White's another one, I'm not sure. But that just shows you the character in that locker room. It's really good stuff, a cool story. So make sure you go and try to help out if you can. And as always, be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WV football podcast, In the Gun. For Jed Drenning, Wes Euler, Owen Schmidt, I'm Skylar Callan. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys back here next week.
ITG.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback,
be sure to follow us on X at In the Gun Podcast.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.